Hey, this is Christian Buckley with another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm here this morning talking with Dan. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Christian. How's it going, man?
Hey, pretty good. And for those that don't know Dan Usher, the elusive Dan Usher, why don't you introduce yourself, who you are, where you work, what you do, all that stuff.
Sure. So first off, Christian, thanks for having me on the show. Who am I? That is a very good question. So I live in the greater DC metropolitan area in the Virginia side, which for those of you that live in the area is the side that I think is a little more congested with traffic and has no actual sports teams. So they're all up in Maryland and DC. But a little bit about me. I work as a chief technologist at Booz Allen Hamilton. It's a consulting firm in the DC metro area. Specifically for myself, I do more kind of the cloud architecture, operations, engineering side of things, and that spans across productivity as well as other workloads. So if it's folks working with SharePoint, Office 365, or folks that are just trying to get out of their data centers to get up into a cloud-hosted environment, where either they can save money and do things in a more burstable fashion, or find themselves maybe learning that cloud doesn't always save you money. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah, that's an interesting position that I've gotten some flack for holding that position from some Microsoft salespeople that didn't care for that, but that's been my position as well. For as you know, I've been a huge advocate for hybrid, and my philosophy is move to the cloud when it makes sense to move to the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, that is a crazy idea. I think a lot of folks, they tend to look at pricing and look at their workloads on premises, and they go, wow, I spend X $1,000s on servers and storage and all the people that manage it for me. And then they go look at what the costs are for kind of the major competitors out in the space, whether it be your Azure, your Amazon, your Google, and they do that price comparison, and they quickly jump to it and they say, let's move everything up. And then because they did an immediate quick turn, while things probably were pretty seamless to get up in the cloud, folks aren't running scripts to turn their systems off. Folks aren't, going through and optimizing things. And suddenly they realize there's a little bit more to it than just moving up. So yeah, I'm with you 100% that you do have to do things in a very targeted fashion, and you can't just shift everything up all at once.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is going back a few years, and I've talked about this in other interviews, but I did an interview with a senior Microsoft executive, and he's moved up the ladder a few times. Mr. Jared Spataro, great guy. But we were at the partner conference, and back in my Exceller days, and my CEO, Mike Alden, and I were meeting with Jared and kind of getting it, sharing what's happening with our ISV and our products. And so I asked him, I said, because this is back when Ballmer was still, CEO, and asked him, well, how quickly do you see the majority of production systems moving to the cloud? And he said 2 to 3 years. And so that was I left Exceller, and we got acquired in 2013. So this was, I think, summer of 2013 when that happened, or 2012, sometime around there. And we said, well, our research in our customer environments, and we do migration, software, and administration, we think it's closer to probably 7 to 10 years before we see a majority. And he laughed. And it's interesting. A year later, we met with Jared again, and some research had come out and some other data, and Microsoft had started shifting their marketing message toward more of the hybrid story. And he said, and he was and I said, hey, you remember our conversation last year? And he says, yes, I do. I said, you remember what you said? He says, I believe I said 2 to 3 years. He said, and I said, what are your thoughts now? He's like, well, says, I think the last year we've had a lot of research come in. We've had a lot of conversations with the enterprise clients, and we understand now that it's going to be a much longer journey for many organizations. And I think even Teeper said in the research that CollabTalk did and we did for the community was that the impact of hybrid was just much larger than what Microsoft ever thought that it would be. And it's fairly persistent. It's stuck around. While you have, I think even nowadays, you've got, I'm sure you see this with your customers as well, organizations that are embracing new cloud technology, but they're still not moving off of a lot of these other on-prem environments, that it's a transition over time.
Yeah, the transition is definitely something that is a bit of a, I won't call it a time sink, but a bit of runway you've got to build out there to be able to get some of these things, both from a people process side of things, but also the technology. So I think, we can go and get MPLS line with ExpressRoute connected up to a client site fairly quick. All the big data providers, network providers, they know that is their bread and butter, and they love getting folks connected. But then, you get a connection connected, and folks sit there and they go, okay, now we have to figure out, now that we have it here, what do we do? And that takes a little bit of time. But I think, to your point, those on-premises workloads, folks, and it comes down to more kind of that change management aspect of things and how the business reacts to it. Shifting a workload up into a cloud environment, you may gain incredible capability, increased uptime and whatnot, but the moment that business user goes and that icon on their desktop has changed or something along those lines, it's a little bit of a change that takes some time for them to get used to, or if it's a critical workload that they have to have, I won't call it zero downtime, but fairly low downtime, taking that away for a weekend or a week, that could be fairly critical and have some ramifications with it that could be problematic. So then you have all the planning and coordination of, when we flip lever A to quickly change DNS to repoint, what does that mean? So yeah, I agree with you that 2 to 3 years, it's probably on the aggressive side. 7 to 10.
We've passed that time. What he
Oh,
thought
yeah,
2 to 3
yeah.
years. We're well past that. But
Yeah.
I think it's I think we were spot on saying 7 to 10 years. We're on target with that now. But one thing I would say, Dan, is that in your experience, because a lot of the concerns initially had less to do with, they weren't concerns about the functionality, the capability, the change management aspect. We'll come back to that. But it was more about just overall security and compliance. Do you think those concerns have dropped off?
I think now that we've got, so if you go out to like Microsoft's Trust Center or the Azure Trust Center and look at the security compliance side of things, they've gone, done their due diligence, gotten the systems accredited and compliant with regulation that exists. So I think in that regard they have. They've also, if you go into your Office 365 admin center and go to security, you can see how your system actually stacks up depending on which plan you have. But you can see that right away as they're going through and doing the compliance check for you. So I think we have made the turn around that corner. Commercial organizations, they have their own compliance they have to perform. If you go into that compliance center, security center inside of Office 365, you see your commercial compliance. If you have certain rules from a DoD or public sector perspective, same deal. Microsoft's already pre-baked a lot of that already into the system. So I feel like we've gotten past a good chunk of that. I think really at this point, it's not so much security accreditations, it's more, how quickly can we get a workload up without disruption? Early on, I definitely agree. It was problematic of folks would say, neat, where are you actually at with XYZ certification or accreditation? And in some cases, it was still in process, or it was something very recently released. If you look back probably to, I don't know, the 2014, 2015 time period when the first sets of accreditation certifications started to hit from more of a public sector perspective. I think that really started to open the door for folks to even have the conversation. So up to that point, commercial businesses, sure, they could jump in and quickly start making use of capability, but other segments of organizations just kind of sat on the sidelines waiting.
Yeah, well, a lot of the public sector stuff now, in fact, it's a fairly common question, and where you'll get the the updates, the emails that come out a couple times a week from Microsoft, from Office 365, saying, hey, these new features, and here's the new capabilities, and you see that question pretty common. It's like, yeah, when's this available in the GCC? When is this available in my country?
Right.
And it's so with any of those. I don't know if you saw, I did a little meme where I called it nophomephobia. It's not for me phobia. The nophomephobia, it's the fear of receiving those updates, getting excited about a new feature, and then finding that feature's not yet available on my tenant. That's the phobia that I have.
Yeah, I mean, to that point though, even with you talk about the Office 365 tenants and things rolling out over time. I don't know if you know Rima Reyes. She's on the Teams product team for government. And it's kind of comical to see her tweets out on Twitter just around, hey, this is now available in GCC and this is now available. So typically I see those and I kind of scratch my head and I'm like, yeah, you're right. That isn't over on GCC yet, is it? Okay, time to go back to that friendly service description and see where things are actually at or when they're projected to be ready. But yeah, there's that that meme that you have that's characteristic, I think, of a lot of people that perhaps aren't in the US. If you, caveat to that, I know Microsoft in some cases is, taking a capability and said, you know what, let's deploy this out to Europe, and they'll put it out there,
they'll
do
test
a little bit of
stuff, and they'll do that in Asia as well. Well, that's why, it's, and I don't want to sound like selfish, like it's not good enough, Microsoft, we need more information. But we used to always talk about like not having a clear picture of the roadmap, and they came out with the product roadmap site, and you can now go in and create agents on around certain features and track specific features or hashtags for product areas. There's a bunch of different ways you can consume that roadmap information, and so that's part of the updates. We're seeing this stuff, but I would love to see that stuff based on my tenant. So like if my update, if it, like Microsoft knows what's in my tenant. So if the AI goes and intelligent pulls from, hey, here's what's available, and only sends me the notifications based on what is currently available within my tenant, then I know to care. Because what I'm doing now is I'm looking at my calendar on the other screen is I'll find out about stuff, and it'll talk about, hey, this is, by end of month, or start rolling out. That's the key phrase there, start rolling out, or begin rolling out to tenants. And so I'll put a reminder like 2 months in advance, because what happens is we'll get all this flurry of activity of Microsoft talking about something that's not yet available. It's coming out end of Q1. And then you have to wait for the tenants to receive those. And, even as a kind of a first ring or whatever it is, so my tenant should get these features earlier, but I'll have these reminders, because otherwise all this flurry of conversation around the feature, I'll forget completely about it. It'll come out. And then months after that, be like, oh yeah, I'll see somebody else asking about a feature. It's like, oh, it's been available for months. Like,
right.
Haven't seen it yet. Haven't played with it yet. It didn't, for whatever reason. So
I think you say that, and I kind of chuckle because one of my Office 365 tenants, because it just gets used for test and development features and whatnot, I don't actually receive email from it. I'll go into email to play with groups and like send messages from fake people back and forth to myself, just so you've got some dummy data and see how things work. But I swear the main account on there gets more email than anything else, just because it'll be the little updates that are like, oh, emergency update being pushed this weekend. You will now see this change in Teams. And it's like, Okay, neat. And I think literally that thing probably gets 12 emails a week from Microsoft just about the different changes that are going on inside the tenant. It's just a
Yeah,
little
with
unnerving.
Azure as well. Is the system was
Uh,
down. It's like, oh, it went down twice and was restored all while I was asleep. Thank you.
right.
You know.
And DNS still works. Yay. But yeah, that piece of it though, the alerts and notifications, as a administrator or an architect, that's terrific. You have that insight. I think on the end user side of it though, like, hey, wait, where'd my cheese go? Where'd that button go? That's the one piece I still feel like, at least when the cloud side of things, that we're still struggling with, to keep folks informed. And so you talk about first ring, and wanting to see those updates immediately. Corporate users, they're usually on, I'll call it, planet 9, far, far away. They orbit the sun, what is it, every so many Earth years, and get those updates. And so it'll be like every 6 months, they'll get an update. And usually by that point, most people have probably forgotten about it and whatever that neat widget is. There is that flip side of keeping folks up to date, and alert that something's going to be coming out that might be useful, or something breaks, and because they don't get updates but on that regular basis of every 6 months, functionality suddenly is lost. So, and then you mix the mobile side of it and it just gets even crazier. So
Yeah, it's a well, I think so. I've got one client now where I'm doing a bunch of content that's specifically around the change management, and I mean that's where we are. We live in a change management world. I mean, I used to talk about that in the migration space.
yeah,
Migration is like, it's not a one-time thing. Nobody ever just did a migration one time. Move from system A to system B, and then you have an org change, and then you have some other restructuring, and then you have another new tenant, or you do an acquisition. I mean, there's constantly the movement of data across these systems. But now with all these new features and capabilities and a lot of the flexibility, it's getting easier. The old migration, it's getting easier to do a lot of those same activities. But then again, we have tons more data. There's just a lot happening, and our end users are getting more advanced, and so they're making requests that they 5 years ago they didn't know to make requests about. They have some idea around the logic of the workflows that they need to put together. They have an idea of what is accessible via the APIs, via the graph, for example, to pull out of that. They've started thinking about how how they can get the more effective stats and data out of the system and learn from those things. And so it's change management it's just a reality of modern IT. That's the world we live in.
yeah. So I don't personally work for my company's internal IT, and I'm pretty certain they love me because I'll come talk to them about some of the new things coming out, how we might be able to help folks make use of them throughout the company, and things that I think would really, help folks make the investment that they've made already, all the better. Flip side, I'm pretty certain that usually they'll see an email pop in or a Teams message pop up on the little toast in the bottom of the corner of their screen, and they'll go, "Oh no, it's a note from Dan. What's it going to say?" Just because, the flip side of it is I'll go in and I'll ask for strange things that Exchange has on the back end, and they'll say, "Oh, no, that's not within policy. We can't do that." So being the guy that also plays with these things with customers and clients, and having worked through many of the different things, they love the fact that new capabilities and features will bring to the plate and say, "Hey, we got to get these out sooner rather than later to help people." But also when it's it's got this feature, you can turn it on. It would be so much better if we did this. And of course, I forget that there's a bunch of employees that would then impact, and you'd have another change management problem, and people would be scratching their heads going, "What happened to my inbox?" So, yep, yeah,
Little pains for this. Yeah. Well, hey Dan, so kind of switching topics here.
Yeah, man.
I'm trying to remember, did you indicate that we might see you at the MVP Summit this year? Is that gonna happen?
It probably, let's see, when is
That's
that?
March.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, I don't know, man. Plains and I, we're still not good
Yeah.
friends.
That's for those people that don't know Dan. It's like, so my time at first, and I'll do this in the air quotes, meeting Dan was people walking around SharePoint Conference 2009 with
Yep.
your face on foam core with a stick, like little Dan Usher signs,
Yep.
walking around taking selfies with Dan. And that was hilarious. I carried that around for a couple hours. Hadn't met you, but I just thought it was hilarious. And
I think the three folks that were the instigators for that primarily were Fabian Williams, Eric Kraus, and Paul Swider. So
yeah,
I think my favorite photo that I got back was probably somebody that I actually work with that works in the state of Illinois, standing in a bathroom holding it up in front of a mirror and then texting it to me and me going, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, but no, I, as a kid, flew back and forth to Germany multiple times, lived out in Hawaii for a couple of years. Even, as a working employee, on random contracts here and there, flew back and forth to St. Louis, a number of times, but yeah, usually flights and I were just, a little jittery. Did go out to Colorado last year. That was a blast. At one point, it was a little funny. You know how on the back of the seat it has kind of entertainment information and whatnot. You can see where you're at, little plotted flight, and it says what your altitude and speed is. And then at one point, all of a sudden, it said that we were at 130,000 feet. And I said, I'm just going to close my eyes, have some deep breaths, listen to a little bit more classical music, and pretend that that's just some technological error. And sure enough, a couple hours later, we arrived in lovely Denver, Colorado, and went up to the Rockies and had a great time. But yeah, I'm probably not going to be out there. Also, for those that don't know, I've got a 2-year-old at home that requires a bit of chasing around. So as much as I would love to get out there, probably not going to make it still. I'm starting to see, I think you and Andrew Connell have been role models in the parental way, just in the sense of seeing you guys being able to hop around the country as well as you do, but still have time for family. For me, I think right now folks are kind of wondering,
it's hard
where did Dan go?
It's hard when they're little. And honestly, it's one of the things I look back over my career. I spent so much of the time when my kids were little commuting the Bay Area. It's one of the main reasons why we left California, because we were a single income family. And so to give my wife and 4 kids a good life, we lived really far away from where all the tech jobs were. And so I commuted, I averaged close to 3 hours a day. And did that for a decade, the last decade, and we just finally said, enough of that, and left. And so haven't looked back at that, but yeah.
3 hours a day. Wow.
Yeah. Well, that was, especially because I had to cross a bridge for most of that decade. I worked over on the peninsula in San Francisco proper, down in San Mateo and Redwood City and Palo Alto. And I just never do that again, and no desire to go back to California anyway. But
sure.
But it's so now we're empty nesters. But even so, I've got my fur babies, so and they are, I think, much more emotionally needy than my actual children ever were. Yeah.
So I'm curious, but how do you feel about I guess it's Microsoft Ignite repointing down to, what is this year, New Orleans?
In New Orleans, yeah. So my first thought was, so I've had some fantastic food experiences in New Orleans. It's going to be a bit more cramped and spread out. I mean, the hotel, stuff, but I love New Orleans. So, but again, specifically the food down there, it's
Sure.
fantastic. I'm looking forward. I've got a couple places. I don't know the names of them. I just know where they are. I've been there several times. Tech Ed's been there a couple times. Partner Conference has been there a couple times.
A couple times, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know the names of the places. I just know where they are. I still have pictures of them in Facebook of where they are. I took pictures of some of the food that I ate, and I'm looking forward to recapture some of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some great places along Bourbon Street upstairs, and some of the restaurants that I can definitely say were some of the finest cuisine I've had in the South. And for that, I would say New Orleans is a great pick. I agree with you. It's going to be a little bit spread out. I have the concern, of course, that probably we've always had with Orlando as well, which is, will a hurricane strike? But
that's the part,
yeah.
of the part of the world. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was advocating for Toronto again. I liked that location, but
yeah,
we're going to do. But well, Dan, I really appreciate your time, taking the time to finally connect and
man.
talk shop. And if people want to find out more about you, get in touch with you, what's the best way that people can reach you?
So they can find me on Twitter, no longer Usher. Haven't had it since 2013.
Yeah, we didn't even get into that story. That's right.
Yeah.
You used to be the holder of the Usher, and then you got paid an undisclosed amount to give it up.
Yeah, so you can't sell names on Twitter.
Right.
You can receive an administrative fee for the transfer. So what that means is what that means. However, yes, I will use a comma in there. The guy, I think it's something like it's headlines breaking news, so it's not fully spelled out breaking news. He had that. CNN came, knocked on his door, said, "Hey, we want it," and he said, "Okay, I'll give it to you as long as I can remain a consultant for you for social media." And I think took like $50,000 or $80,000 a year job doing social media for CNN to run their Twitter account for them. Which, looking back, I'm like, man, if I had been able to like work something out like that, where I had free tickets or could go on tour, that would be pretty crazy.
If you like the music, sure.
Yeah. So you can find me out on Twitter at Binary Brewery, or you can find me out at danusher.com, and email still seems to be the most resilient way. Just danusher@live.com.
Very cool. Well, Dan,
Cool.
well, thanks for your time, and enjoy your day off and with the family, and we'll see you soon.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks.